From Sunset Beach, Hawaii, weighing 267 pounds, the magnificent Muraco.
Why is it they call him magnificent?
The man who lifts condominiums off his chest.
Anything that's explosive, anything that's exciting, Prince of Darkness, Master of Destruction, perpetrator of violence. Get ready! I'm gonna burn this place down!
Hello and welcome to Don Muraco's Magnificent Podcast. My name's James, and I think with the intros, I think we're all just like sighing in relief now that I'm keeping them shorter and shorter. So, Instagram, Twitter, you know the whole deal. And if you want some signed merchandise, donmuraco.com. And if you want some quality books that I have written, Owen, Hart, and The Rock, you can see them in the background there on Amazon exclusively if you are interested. But we are going to be delving into a two-part episode on Tito Santana. And as Don said before, he was surprised that I got one episode out of Tito Santana as a subject. But no, I got two. But for now, let's throw it to the beach bum, The Rock, the original surfer of wrestling. It is Don Muraco. How are you doing?
How you doing? What?
I nearly ruined the intro again. I was like, because I normally say the original Rock, and then it was the original surfer of wrestling.
I have trouble labeling myself too.
Yeah, the star of the show. We will stick with the star of the show because it's definitely
star
not
of the
me.
show. All right, I like that.
Yeah, and I've also said this as well. You're going to make some people happy that you're finally growing in the beard.
Oh yeah, just been lazy for a couple of days. That's all.
Yeah,
my bicep is torn, so I can't. I've been brushing my teeth with my left hand, and I eat. I put my face in the plate and scoop food into my mouth as I can't. Well, it's better now. It cramps and locks up when
I forgot to ask this. What was the original injury? Was it just something of nothing?
I tore my rotator out, and then tore the rotator, and then from that the bicep tore.
Is
about 3 or 4? Just finally getting over it now. About 3 or 4 weeks of.
Is this like an old wrestling injury, or is this something you just
old
move
man
slightly?
Injury. Yeah, that too. Old workout, complete. Too many miles, too many smiles. It just happens,
Oh, dear me. Well, I mean, they were threatening you with surgery, and now you don't need surgery. Or
well, I was threatening myself, which I would, that I would submit to getting a shoulder replacement, which I believe I miss throwing balls and stuff with my grandkids, that type of use. But honestly, what am I going to do? I'm not unless Flair calls me to make a comeback with him, then I have no need for throwing overhand rights.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Flair is 72, isn't he? And you're 72.
1 year older than me.
Well, there you go.
73, yeah.
Yeah, if we have like a Masters of Masters league in a wrestling promotion somewhere, then you should definitely consider getting the shoulder.
Yeah, that'd be the belt for the 45th time. He'd be the champion.
And a free set of dentures to go along with it.
He loves it, man. He loved the business before he even got into it. I guess as soon as Gagne found him, he was a taker.
Yeah, and he was going to quit as well, wasn't he? When Vern was training him, yeah.
Yeah, they're stretching the hell out of him. He was a cocky, chubby kid, that nobody knew who the hell he was. He was out of the whole crew there. He was the biggest nobody, the biggest zero. Patera, Bruggers, Sheik, Greg the son, of course, and Jimmy Brunzell. Well-conditioned, fine-tuned athlete. And then Flair was the sixth guy. So who'd have thunk it, of all that he would come out and be the one of the all-time greatest out of the six. Mm. But if you knew his attitude and you knew, you knew his mindset getting into the bed, you certainly wouldn't, it wouldn't surprise you. Like I knew him before, during, and after. Nothing he does really surprises you.
It's funny how the plane crash with Flair almost woke him up in a sense. I mean, he had to recover for months and he was in horrible pain and everything, but it took a few months for him to sort of step back forcibly but then work out what his character really needed to be. And then from then on, he was the Ric Flair that we all know today.
Could be. I'm not familiar closely with what happened there, but that was the Bobby Shane when Bobby Shane died, right?
There were twos. There were two.
He was on two of them. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there was. Which was the one that Austin Idol was on? Because that wasn't the same one as the Flair one.
That was Buddy Colt.
Yeah, that wasn't the same one. I think Flair was on the one with Johnny Valentine. I think
Valentine broke his back in that one.
Yeah, I think it was that one. Yeah.
So that was up in Carolinas.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And Buddy Colt was down in Tampa. He wasn't with Buddy?
I don't think so, no.
You had Gary Hart, Mike McCord, Buddy, and one other person. Wasn't there a fourth?
I'll tell you what, I'm sure somebody...
Or Bobby Shane. Was Bobby Shane the fourth person?
Do you know what? I'm going to Google this. Hang on, Bobby Shane. No, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. It was Gary Hart, Austin Idol, Buddy Colt, who was piloting the Cessna 182, excuse me. And yeah, it was in Tampa Bay. So, yeah, that was my bad.
Who was the fourth person?
Bobby Shane, you were right.
Oh, it was the one he passed away in.
Yeah, near me.
Oh, okay.
Tell you, we're as the blind leading the blind with famous wrestling aircraft.
Well, sketchy details over everything, no. It's hard to,
Well, hopefully you've got some good memories of this fella, and I believe we've talked about him before, and a fault on my part was originally that I put the wrong Reggie Parks on. It was actually Reg Park on a video that you talked about, Reggie Parks, who was the bodybuilder, but the King of Belts, and long time, would it be right to describe him as journeyman, Reggie Parks? He passed away 87 recently.
Probably later he was a journeyman. Earlier I think he was a top. He was always had a great body. Ran about 225, 230, immaculate shape, good worker. I don't know what kind of promos he did, babyface promos. So had to be pretty decent. So I don't know. He was around Omaha. Probably did some main events. AWA and stuff. By the time I met him, he'd come down a little bit, but yeah, great guy.
Yeah, was he a heel? Was it the AWA that you wrestled with him?
He was a babyface. I don't know that he was ever a heel. He could have been.
Yeah. So you were a babyface as well. So I imagine, would have hung out with him a lot. I mean, so what was he like personally?
Yeah, I was around him a bit. Not that he was a hangout guy, but he was. It was pretty organized. The meal, he liked to drink beer, and he had a limit on everything. Everything was everything was well under control for himself.
This sort of actually leads to another question just off the top of my head was, when you were sort of like in the bodybuilding phases during your career, how did you make sure to eat right on the road? And where were some of your favorite eateries that you could get?
Wow, you're young. It wasn't like now. So it was meat, steak or steak and chicken, just like now. I like pretty much like anybody, and then cutting the carbs, sticking with the strong protein, just staying away from the butter. Like potatoes you think are bad, but potatoes aren't bad. You never get rice on the road, especially in the mainland United States, much less brown rice. So it's just sticking with the within the confines of the. You get a hamburger, you throw the buns away, and just fork and knife it with the tomato and the salad and stuff, and pretty much that. Yeah. Pick at the fries. Don't dive in. Don't be a bam bam. Don't do the bam bam bit. But yeah, you just watch. I mean, you're on the road with W. You're making good bread, so you can order, no problem, steak and eggs or steak and this, steak and that.
When you were working in the Southern Territories, were you a frequenter of Waffle House?
Yeah. Well, not the late night. In Georgia, I was. In Florida, there were some other places there was there were a couple of chicken places, fried chicken places. They were open real late. There were Bexley's. Bexley's. Oh, everything's long gone. This is close to maybe a long time, 40, 50 years ago. But there was, and it wasn't not even the same time. Yeah, a lot of chicken. Always chicken, And Florida had the great barbecue chicken places. Oh my God.
Did you ever, I know this sounds like a weird thing, but did you ever like do pack lunches on the road, or did you always eat at fast food or general restaurants?
Some guys did. I remember Luger and some of those guys, would have the chicken breasts and, and carrot sticks or whatever. So, but I pretty much ate on the road all the time, would find and just, spend and eat whatever. I wasn't that strict, I never really had the torn up 6-pack or anything, So I was drinking beer at night. Hell, I mean, there wasn't a night that went by that I, didn't kill a 6-pack for years. That's, I haven't done a 6-pack in the last 2 months. So, like I said, it's, you can handle those, you can eat steak. You can eat, pork chops and steak and, you stay with the lean. And naturally chicken. I told you the Fuji chicken ribs he played on and stuff like that. I didn't even know he was playing a rib.
Yeah.
It's, damn
it. Oh damn, I've forgotten oh yes, I know what it was. So you said you kill a 6-pack every night. We always talk about beer, and we were talking about that wine I was drinking just before as well. A nice, not a Merlot. I've forgotten what the damn name is. Not a Rioja.
My Merlot's fine. Yeah. Malbec.
Yeah, Malbec. Thank you for telling me what I was drinking. And 6-pack on the road. The one brand you would always go for. There was just the one that you'd always go for. That was the king of beers that you'd get.
I changed a lot. I had a lot. Heineken, St. Pauli Grill, something would always be, if they had that. Figure, we were shopping on 7-Elevens most of the time. It wasn't top shelf. We weren't doing the top shelf. I was never a Bud guy. I wasn't for a little while, but I wasn't somehow. And Bud, you got to get in the right places to keep fresh. Otherwise, it gets old fast. The Briscoes Briscoes drank too much. They lived in Tampa. They got right from the brewery right there in Tampa, right? So, yeah, the imports mostly I'd fall back on. And then Coors or something else during the time.
Well, I was actually going to say, did anyone who the early adopters of light beers to cut down on calories and carbs? I'm burping now.
Foods like the Coors Light. I can, like I said, I go from beer to beer from time to time, depending what they have. They had a lot of local, not microbreweries, but local. Minnesota, I remember they had a local beer. Philadelphia's and New York, upstate New York, Genesee, and some of the I wasn't crazy about, but they have some beers upstate New York that are, everything. Then you get up into Canada. Oh my God.
Well, Canada's going to be coming up late, but just for the podcast audience, I'm actually going to look at this camera this time. That is what basically me and Don talk about exclusively when we're not recording this podcast. We just talk about
beer.
Beer.
Homer Simpson, beer.
And just all the beers, all the food we've had recently, and that basically sort of comprises our entire conversation. Right, I'll tell you what, we're going to move on to the subject of this podcast and going to be the next one as well, and it's going to be Tito Santana. As you said, I surprised myself when I came up with Ariba, indeed. I came up with 2 episodes worth. I even surprised myself, let alone you, that I got 2 episodes worth of content for Tito. But I'm going to, first of all, give you his real name, Merced Solis, and tell you what he's up to at the moment. He runs a hair salon and this is an almost impossibly complicated name, Sucasuna, Kenville, New Jersey. Did I say that right?
I don't know.
You used to live in New Jersey, didn't you?
Yeah, Edison. It's basically same area. That's they get into the little districts there. He's had that for quite some time. I remember I saw him in early 2000s. Yeah, I got my wife is, he's doing the school gig, and so my wife is, I don't know how many chair salon, but it's quite a few. Yeah, my wife's running a 18 or 24, something like that, chair salon I got in New Jersey. That's been quite a while too. So he's done well after wrestling. And we joke about getting 2 episodes, but he had a real meaty career. I mean, he was around in a lot of stuff, and just spent an incredible amount of time in the WWF, from way back when. You got notes later to come, but he had a full career, but just my experiences were certainly limited.
Oh, with Tito himself?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
As far as in the we're recovering the Intercontinental title, and in New York and all the stuff that was going on. New York, I say New York, and WWF at the time. We called it New York back in those days until it became a global phenomenon.
Oh, well, don't worry. We're going to drag out 2 episodes out of Tito, whether he likes it or not. I should also mention that I believe he's still, at least from a few years ago, he's a Spanish teacher and a gym teacher in Roxbury, New Jersey as well. Early in his career, actually, before I ask that, because he's well educated, had a degree and everything before he got into wrestling. Was he, when you were speaking to him, could you just tell this was sort of maybe like a cut above as far as intelligence and everything than your average wrestler, because he had a degree and you're well educated man.
Yeah, apart from all the other 2-syllable wrestlers, and and then being able to interpret Fuji's whatever language Fuji was. He was yeah. Well, you take Martel and Pat Patterson. They had the French Canadian, and he was there. That's professional wrestlers on the whole were pretty, with it, group of guys, intelligent. Angelo Mosca started at Notre Dame, graduated from Wyoming, but Tito was obviously a cut above. He wasn't a goof, running around. He was somebody that that would be easy to be, easily be respected and understood.
Early in his career, he's known as Richard Blood. Also Dick Blood. This must have been a rib on Ricky Steamboat, surely.
I don't know. Were they in the same team? Were they in Florida together?
I didn't even know that Ricky Steamboat ever went to Florida. But I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, Steamboat was down in Florida. He was in Florida for a while as Steamboat. And I don't know if Tito was there at the same time or not.
I think we're talking around 1977.
Did Tito come from the Funks?
No, well, as far as I know, so he was in West Texas State. I didn't get his book in time because I would have actually read it in preparation. But he was in West Texas State, and the quarterback there was Tully Blanchard. But he didn't. I don't even think he wrestled for Southwest, or if he did, it was very briefly, and then he went to Florida and Georgia early in his career.
I know of Joe Blanchard and Tully Blanchard from Tally Ho, because Joe Blanchard and Tally were I think they were a tag team, in fact, and they worked a lot of the same territory. So of that, I heard a lot of Tully Blanchard. I know he was a hell of a quarterback at West Texas or North Texas, whatever Texas State he went to, and from our reading. The prep for this, that the Tito was his tight end. So that's probably he came back there. Whether he set him up with the Funks or they were training out of the Dallas area, I'm sure he probably started there. And then set him on the road. Well,
actually, this is just my memory coming back now. Also, I did check, you were right, Ricky Steamboat was Florida in 1977, but Tito was trained by Hiro Matsuda.
Okay, yeah. So he started in Florida then?
Yeah, it seems like he did. I'm sorry, everybody. I should have really known that better. But anyway, I suppose from I've sent you a bit of prep and everything for this interview, like I always do. Did you know anything about Tito's American football career beyond the basics? I know he was in the preseason for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think.
He had a hurt knee or something that's kept him from making the team, and he played
his ankles, I think. Yeah,
he had 2 or 3 solid years in college, and then ended up in Canada for a little while. So it's probably, I'm sure the connections there. I'm probably the Blanchards had a lot to do with him getting in the. I would guess, just a wild guess on my part. Not having any knowledge, but it would. Yeah, he would certainly. He was a Texas boy too.
Yep. So you never met Tully Blanchard then?
Handshake. Just hello, and never been fortunate enough to work with he and Arn or any of those guys. When they were WCW or NWA, and that they were fine workers.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what. Then we'll move straight on to AWA, and I hadn't really realised because I know Tito was in the WWF before the AWA, and then he had a 2-year or so AWA run. And it seems that one of the biggest rivalries that he had was with Sheikh Adnan Al-Kaisi, that fans like me, the younger fans, will recognise best as one of Sergeant Slaughter's underlings, and when he was doing the Iraqi sympathiser thing. Sheikh Adnan Al-Kaisi, did you ever come across him? He was Billy White Wolf as well.
Oh yeah, I knew him well. He still works out. He spends time between Minnesota and Hawaii here. He works out. He's one of those guys who's in the gym at 4:30 in the morning. He sends me, you know what? Call me sometime. I'm up early and I'm out, and a friend of mine, a retired fireman, he says, "Oh, I was talking to Billy." Everybody calls him Billy here in Hawaii. He had everybody fooled. He just when he came out as the Iraqi colonel, because he was Billy White Wolf here in Hawaii. He just did with the feathers and the Indian dance and the strap matches. He was over for years. He was a great baby face. And I traveled and he was working here. What an athlete he was. He was, he's got 14, 15 years on. We used to run Diamond Head. Boy, I'd kill myself to keep up with the guy. And he'd have a full rubber suit on, everything. He could just go. I think he was a NCAA wrestler before Jack Briscoe out of Oklahoma State. So yeah, that would be a natural, Tito and him. And easy, Tito was easy. So I know Billy by that age, he didn't want to be roughed up. I'm sure, brothers,
So was he a big star in Hawaii then?
White Wolf?
Yeah.
Adnan Casey?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He was one of the first. He was an Indian guy that he pioneered the territory. And I get back in those days, they're probably making, they're only working a Wednesday, every Wednesday for sure. Then on the weekend, you had possibly a military base or you went out Outer Island. So 3 days, 3 days a week tops. 3 days a week.
He's ringing
tops.
you now. Adnan's ringing you, making sure you say nice things.
3 days a week tops. So so he would come and oh my God.
Do we need to pause?
Yeah, he would come and he would stay months and months at a time. I guess he work it out between. Billy was a very frugal guy as well. He didn't out partying, drinking, the big lavish dinners or anything. He kept close to the vest, so he could live on whatever he was making here easily, and then he had a good stash.
So you said a good stash? Oh, of money. Okay, sorry.
Money, yeah.
All right, I assume something else then.
I don't think he drank. I don't know. I don't know that he ever drank. Anything else?
Well, you said you knew him very well then. So have you got any stories on him beyond sort of like the in-ring stuff?
No, just that they almost hung him in Iraq.
Right.
And well, he did that with $100,000, 100,000 people venue in Baghdad. He took that Bob Roop and that crew over there, and then they drew all that big money for there. I don't know what they charge, but then Saddam was tight and he didn't want to split.
Well, even his old childhood friend he didn't want to split with. Is that true that he went to high school and was good friends with him?
I don't know. I know he's. Well, evidently. All I know is he was Billy White over here. We were in Singapore. Together. Spent a couple of weeks. When he was, he's easy guy to get along with. Easy guy to, not heavy on your head.
I know that you weren't there at the time with the WWF, but you must have been watching in 1991 and looking at the Iraqi sympathizer gimmick, the Gulf War pretty much going on at the same time. Yeah. And you're feeling like, I mean, how in bad taste did you feel like that was at the time? Because as a kid, I didn't realize one way from from another.
That's a lot of heat to carry. That's not, that's not, I'm Magnificent Muraco, I'm so much better than you, and I'm so much finer than you. No, that's, you got kids, you got family people dying and boots on the ground and stuff over there. So that's a hell of a responsibility carrying that type of heat. I realize people hated me for a lot of different, reasons, but never for anything, serious like that. That's a lot of, even that old Russian Ivan Koloff, or even the old Japanese stuff, and the Japanese and the Germans and stuff, even that is a lot of heavy, there's a lot of rugged heat to try and carry around. And because, it's, some people really have a, thing for it.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it was the Cold War at the time. It was cold. There was not actually any fighting. It was sort of in the past and playing off past wars and tensions and everything else like that. So I do understand. With Tito Santana, and I'm doing my best not to call him Tito Ortiz. Like, I've Googled Ortiz more than Santana tonight when I was doing the research. With Tito Santana, he would then move on to Bobby Duncan. And this is somebody I really don't know other than a cowboy gimmick, really. Big, rugged, tough son of a gun, and remember his son in WCW as well. So did you ever see Bobby Duncan Sr. in action?
Yeah, he was in Florida. He was around for a couple miles. Gary Hart had an army there. He was one of Gary Hart's charges, and he was just finishing up. He was a big raw bone, he was solid. Ex-football player and stuff, have riots and he'd just run over the people. He'd just be running on top of them. And he was kind of, as I came in, he was finishing up his last couple months. Then he was going up to, who was it, Pedro or Bruno? Who was the champion at the time?
He wrestled Bruno, I think.
Was it Bruno? Was it champion? Well, he was going into New York and I think he got knocked down because with a blood disease or ALS or something like that. After something came, or maybe his wife got ill, became ill or something. But something, because the sky was a limit for him. He was 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", 265, 275 pounds. Lean, not a fat guy. Just a big guy. Not even the belly like Murdoch, just a big solid guy. Kind of like DiBiase, only even bigger than DiBiase. And a great worker too. Something got some kind of health problems derailed his. So that must have been a great feud with him and Tito. Was that WWF?
No, that was AWA.
It was AWA? Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So that was after his New York run.
That was around 80. I think it was around 81-ish, I want to say.
Okay, well, so AWA was still doing good business then.
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Hogan was still there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's doing great. Right. All right. So he was a big, obviously he was a big card. He was a big, it's natural. You just look at the guy, and if people talk about great interviewers and great talkers and stuff. You don't become a great interviewer, a great speaker unless you have the opportunity to go over and over, to repeat and develop a character, develop a personality that kind of suits you. To go on like Russian Koloff with the Russian, always spoke with the Russian accent, the silent. If you don't have, you need time. Well, this guy was a good worker in the ring and so, but he wasn't strong in the promos. Some guys are not strong in the promos because they're not, they don't get a lot of pitches to swing at, So once they get up there, they're, I love the people and the friends and everybody's so nice to me. I just love everybody, blowing kisses. They don't get a chance to go, you dirty son of a, I hate you. And your wife's a dog and everything else, to really cut loose, and stuff like that. So you don't know how somebody's going to react until they, had a half a dozen times to run their character down the thing. And then back in those days, if that was a problem, bingo, you got a manager running the town, running the talent there. Gary Hart, one of those guys.
I'll move on from Bobby Duncombe, and I know you've already said off air that you didn't really know him very well, but I wanted to give him a shout because I know he listens. Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal.
Only handshake a couple times. I met him several in passing. He was with WWF for a while, I think. And then I met him. I did a Legend show or something in Atlanta when he was there. I told you about Tally. When Tally Hill was there, they teach him how to be English. They teach us how to be English. I thought he was like Mr. Electricity. He was a smooth style worker. Good.
You were in Georgia Championship Wrestling, I believe, in 1982, and you missed Tito Santana coming into the promotion by mere days. Was Tito basically your replacement when you left?
Gee, I don't know. I have no idea. I wasn't. I had some good shots. I took the belt from Harley, and I had some good spots and matches with Abdullah. So I don't know what the promotion had in store for him when he came in. Does he come from New York or?
He may well. Yeah, no, he would have come from the AWA, and then he would have gone WWF afterwards, I think.
Well, it would have been office, probably an office, liaison, office dealings. So he probably had a good spot to go into.
Also in Georgia Championship Wrestling, Tito, I don't know if he had like a proper feud with him, but he did seem to wrestle him a lot, was Buzz Sawyer. Did you have an experience with Buzz or Brett?
Brett, I never knew. I saw him a couple times, never knew. Buzz, I knew a lot. Buzz, I was around, I saw a lot. He was a hell of a hand. Would have been, but he was slow. He wouldn't, he was, sometimes people that are that incredibly talented are off the track in other aspects of their life because he was just meant, and I guess in the ring training guys and stuff, he was just a bulldog. He just turned him loose on guys. So, but I knew him. He was around. He was good. Good kid.
From what I understand, some angry might be the wrong word, but easily set off.
Oh, possibly. I don't know. I just watched him. Worked with him. He was in a good spot. Ole Anderson was kind of mentoring him, sort of, or trying to keep him from. He was married, had a thing, and I remember he was talking to some lady, a girl or something, and left her car, his sweater in his car. He used to do stuff like that all the time. Just, yeah. not really thoughtful. Didn't really, pay attention to what's going down.
Oh, right. I thought it was like some sort of like ploy to like have to go back to the girl's house to get the sweater again.
No, he's
Fair enough. Then.
airhead.
Yeah. Was he someone who might battle the fans more than most? I've got a feeling he might be.
Yeah, it could be. He was young, He was a young guy. And he was, he was, yeah, well, you know what youth does to you. It makes you, it gives you all kinds of brave. So, yeah.
Brave thoughts. I'll tell you what then, we'll go straight to the WWF. And Tito was already in the WWF for a spell, but this is the main one where he's on a run of, a dozen years or so. And the very first match that I can find he has in the WWF in this run is with Johnny Rodz. And we've never brought up Johnny Rodz before. He's still kicking. He's I think he's well into his 80s and everything. Long time enhancement talent, jobber back in the old days. And he also had quite a reputation of schooling guys that needed to be schooled as well. But Johnny Rodz, what do you remember of him?
Oh, good guy. Great performer. He looked habitual card player. One of Scolin's. He was one of the guys in Scolin's van. And they always had the card deck going, and then the cards out. And I had some. He was always a baby face for me, and I was the heel with him. So I had some great matches with him. Remember Worcester? We had when I was a champion. They thought he was going to take the belt a bunch of times, and So yeah, he was a hell of a worker. Had good runs other places where Vince Senior sent him out of the territory. Like SD and some of those other guys, Dave Johann and those other guys that he used to send on missions to other parts of the country to kind of to freshen them up for their TV. He was a Java in LA, Java something. He was like an Abdullah gimmick. And he went out there, won their battle royal. And I think it was with Piper. He had feuded with Piper for several months before he went back to Brooklyn, back to the Bronx. Yeah, good guy. Was just getting married. His second wife at the time, who he's still with, and having going through when I came in there, and had been along, come up, lived. People don't realize those guys what a great living they had, living in the city like that, and working, working all around, and they screw up for the money lots of times, but they were, in those days they're making good money. They're probably picking up, extra $5 a week, working around the different, because the payoffs were good. Skolin and Monsoon and all those guys were making all the local payoffs. So they, they weren't, everything wasn't going through the office. And there weren't all that many hands in the pot, just right out of theirs. So they were good, they had their $25, $75 nights. But they're having a lot of good nights too. And no traveling, living at home.
With Johnny, was he, as I imagine him to be, or maybe I've heard him to be, sort of like someone who you would be put with if the management thought that you needed your attitude testing?
Not when I was around. I mean, maybe earlier. It could be. Like I say, he was
maybe for like the younger wrestlers, I should say. I mean, you were obviously like established and everything, but for maybe the younger wrestlers, you were put with him and see where you were at, mentally.
Possibly, everybody knew Johnny could take care of stuff, but like we spoke earlier about the Bret Hart, the Tom McGee match and stuff. People were already you'd made your bones all around the world, around the country. And so you were in the New, I'll call it the New York territory. You're up there in New York to get yourself over and to do anything. So there weren't places where guys were coming in to be tested by by Johnny Rodz or SD or other they'd like to see you, I'm sure, and they'd have and other guys that didn't have the full book on, possibly. But I don't know that Johnny ever hurt anybody or ever, took advantage of anybody. I never heard of that or never saw that, never saw it and never heard of it.
Well, Sorry, carry on.
No, Johnny was just straight goods, you know.
With I mean, he ended up teaching a lot of people. You know, Tommy Dreamer, Taz, quite a few names that were in the New York area, and a lot of them sort of filter into ECW. Was he?
Yeah.
I mean, you sort of alluded to it before. That he was like a pretty tough guy. I mean, was he just like straight amateur wrestling, or was he just street brawler, or he just knew how to take care of himself? Did he have like formal fighting training in that sense?
That I don't know. He was. He'd been on the mat with guys from, maybe around, post-Stolen era. And all those guys are old, old salty guys. And, you saw Stolen work, it was nothing to rave home about. But, they're, down on the mat, right? So he came through, he came up that way. So if that was his background, and probably, down in Brooklyn and Bronx and stuff where they had a lot of boxing gyms, wrestling and boxing gyms. So I'm sure he went both ways, and take care of himself. And like I said, I never heard where, he hurt anybody or took advantage of anybody. Never saw it, never heard of it.
Okay, then we'll move on, and I'll probably skip that question and move on to the next one. You've talked about people like Paul Orndorff, yourself, obviously Sergeant Slaughter, and a few others who are basically top heels in the for the incumbent WWF champion to make them look good. By the time you and Tito were sharing a locker room in the WWF, where did you see him sort of in the pecking order as far as toward the main event talent, as an importance on the babyface side of the roster?
World Tag Team Champion, Intercontinental Champion, Hulk's partner in a special match, some kind of match. Although they usually didn't have building a babyface in that manner for Hulk. And normally, Steamboat and a couple other guys where Hulk could swoop in the card and carry him. But he was, he was a solid. Obviously he was going to be a solid position there. Like I said, World Tag Team Champion or fighting or competing for the World Tag Team Champion or competing for Intercontinental or competing, a fall-away angle with a heel, but when the heels would do their second, the second part of their 6 months after going through the champ, 1 or 2 or 3 shots with the champ, and however many it turned out for the office, and he would be in a good spot to run an angle with me or Sergeant Slaughter or any of those top heels like that. They're leaving the territory, and I'm sure everybody be grateful to put him over because it was just the way the business was in those days.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned a match with you, because I've written down the date of your first recorded singles match, 29th of December, 1983, in Landover, Maryland. And you really... Do you know when people talk about, your big feuds with Steamboat and Jimmy Snuka and Bob Backlund in the WWF era, and people mention Tito Santana as well. And what struck me is that you two guys really didn't have many matches together, or at least it didn't seem that way when I was doing the research through the matches. You maybe had a few matches before, the big IC title match where you dropped it to him in Boston, and then maybe only 1 or 2 matches afterwards, and then you disappeared. How come this is a feud that maybe in the memories of the fans is like a big deal? But really, you guys barely really shared the ring that much compared to so many others.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you the way the booking and stuff was going that way. It was a changing time in the territory. They were in a hurry to move things around, and Vince was that TNT and those other the Fuji Vice things and stuff were coming up, and it was like a movement era there within the office with within the boys, with the matches and everything else. So yeah, probably. I regret the finish. I was trying to do something clever on that Boston finish there, and I thought of it several times. She just went with the elbow and left it at that. It would have been that would have been, of course, worked into it, built up a big series to finish like that. But I'll thank the room. I'll thought the room, trying to get fancy and it was okay, but it was.
Well, talk me through the whole thing then. Talk me through the whole elbow thing with the Boston match.
No, there was no elbow thing. Well, maybe there was, but it was a variation on a sunset flip that I was trying to get down there, and it just didn't come out as smooth as I wanted it to. And then looking back on it, I think in retrospect, I'd say it would have been much better with the elbow being Paul. But I was that type of heel that I could have lost that way without being that clever. And I thought the room.
Were you? I can't imagine you were disappointed. Losing the title in front. One of the best crowds in the entire nation. But I mean, really, in your heart of hearts, would you have preferred to have lost the belt in Madison Square Garden or some other arena, or is just Boston the perfect place to do that kind of thing?
Boston's a great place. Boston was an excellent. Boston Garden. The only thing, they wrote, we were the last match. I had to go on last that night. For some reason, they had something. Hulk was working to return. I don't know why we weren't going to return the title, but in some way we had to go last. That's the only thing. And no, Boston was a great market. Boston was a hell of a place. It kind of lost its shine because the Garden was run out of there and the TV had been changing a bit. But Boston was as good a place as it was, especially when it sold out. It was a madhouse.
Yeah, when I look at the old the full shows from that era, I always remember Boston always seemed to have this yellow tinge on the floor. Yeah. So I always know it's Boston when it's just sort of like a weirdly yellow arena.
The parquet floor, for the basketball team, they're the ones that The
Celtics, I know that one. I was going to say the Celtics. I know an American basketball team.
Yeah, no, Boston was a great place.
Yeah. So you didn't really do many return matches because you would leave very soon after dropping the title. I don't know if you've mentioned this before on the podcast or not, but tell me why you left shortly afterwards. This is early 1984.
Did I leave? Did I leave?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you exactly time-wise. So early March, the last match on record for the this is 1984 early March. Andre the Giant defeats Magnificent Muraco. Then you go to New Japan for a tour for 3 weeks or so. Maybe a few more shots.
Was that the one with Sheik and Tony Atlas and everything, all those guys?
In Japan.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to live tell you exactly what matches you had or who was on. Bruce Hart was there, so maybe that's where you saw him have those cold eggs. Where are you? Don Muraco and Mass Superstar. Oh, so you were tagging with Bill Eadie there?
Yeah, there was a tour. Sheik, Orange Sheik, Tony Atlas.
Mike Sharp Jr.
Hulk came over in the middle of the tour.
Black Cat.
Oh, that's where I got that tombstone.
Oh, hang on. I don't know that story then. So what's with the tombstone?
Well, I got the Mexican Lucha Libre.
Oh, that's where you
Black Cat.
That's where you got the finisher.
Yeah.
I see.
Black Cat, Pedro Aguayo, and Green Man, or Green something. Green Man, the three Mexican fellows. The old Pedro Aguayo Sr. I know the son just passed earlier, a couple years ago. And actually, Pedro just died himself a couple years ago. But yeah, there were three Mexican guys on the tour from Lucha Libre.
Well, I can give you the last card if you like. So see if these names sort of ring any bells. Fumihiro Nikura defeats Sunji Kosugi. This might be a complete disaster. I've got to pronounce all these Japanese names and I'll murder them. Anyway, in this last match that I clicked on, Haruka Eigen. You wrestled him apparently.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna leave it there before I butcher the Japanese language. Great memories, long forgotten. Right. I'll move on then. So we are looking at, and I'll probably cut this bit out as well because I'm sort of squinting without my glasses. So it should really be noted here that during your second reign as WWF Intercontinental Champion, that WWF quietly seceded from the NWA for a second time. Did you even realise the WWF was still aligned with the NWA by 83, 84?
No, but those guys are all buddy. You know, their guys are all pals. They'd go like the NFL. You know, they go to NFL. All the promoters that have a convention, so to speak. You know, go some high class hotel and eat steaks and smoke cigars, and all talk about how they're screwing the boys.
Yeah. So yeah, okay, then fair enough. You didn't know anything about that then. So we'll go back to Tito and the flying forearm, the flying jalapeno, as Bobby Heenan, Jesse Ventura used
burrito.
The flying burrito, yeah. And the ones that he did, that finisher always looked really good. Did it look good because he actually punched you in the face?
No. Never knew he was in the ring. He was easy. Tito was easy. He was easy. Didn't do anything. Never thought about. Well, none of the guys that I was working with, you never thought about getting hurt. At that level, I guess different things happen to other different people. Other goes Owen Hart, then Bret Hart getting kicked in the head and stuff like that. But at that level, those type, you never think about getting hurt. But my biggest injury was when I ripped my groin out, just tearing my shoulder out a couple of weeks ago. It was just a freak, something that just happened for the wear and tear,
Yeah. Same with me, actually. The worst injury I ever had, I really tore my back up, and I did it I was trying to pick up a bag off the floor, and I moved that far, and my back went. I didn't even get down, and my back just went just like that. So, yeah, it's just wear and tear. I'll tell you what then. So Tito, apart from the flying burrito, sort of forearm launching punchy thing, his other finisher was the figure 4 leg lock. Who has got the greatest figure 4 leg lock in wrestling history?
Started with BR, right? Buddy Rogers. So probably Jack Briscoe. Jack was the best mechanical guy, of all. Junior, but he didn't use a figure 4. The Texas boys were the Funks, and those guys were Jack Briscoe. You're good at technical stuff. You always be safe throwing his name in the ring, throwing his hat in the ring as a sane, safe, technical performer.
So in the old days, there was, sort of like a short list of like match-ending finishers. Which were the ones that you really enjoyed, sort of, in the business that you thought, man, those fans just love? Because the step over toe hold for me looks really terrible as a young man looking at it thinking, oh, get out of here. But, the fans loved it.
Geez.
Yeah, I was going to say, I should clarify submission hold. I'm sorry. Which were like the big submission holds that you liked the best, or, that were the best finishers of the time?
Junior's spinning toe hold in the figure 4. That figure 4 was always, different guys in different territories would take it as, a signature move that they would, and all the guys they're good technicians, Briscoe and Bockwinkel, and Buddy Rogers, and and as it came to the territory, different guys, the Grahams or the DiBiase, all those kind of, all those guys that are great workers, known as great workers.
Who sort of killed the sleeper hold? Because that was a match ender for decades and decades, and then all of a sudden, no one ever won a match with it.
Yeah, the boys just, it was too close to shoot. It's too hard to somebody, shoot, you choke. And the boys kind of, guys did it to themselves. Like as this progressed now, you don't see a match without somebody getting suplexed off the top. That used to be a whoa, a stop your heart moment. That's now it's it's just another suplex off the top rope. So then Japan to the high risk territories to the movement, everything's progressed. Like we'll get into AEW as we move along, but I know we have that down the road. But yeah, Tito Santana, he could do all the moves, do all the holds. He could take all the moves, would take all the holes. Never hurt you.
With Tito, we're bringing it back to you. In fact, you brought it back to Tito. His blood feud with Greg the Hammer Valentine, the worst Intercontinental champion.
Hot tweet. Liar, spreader of rumors.
Did you?
Guy who talks out of school because he's senile. He's lost his mind. All that bleach has soaked his brain out. I love Greg. Greg was always cool.
Man, if I can ever get Greg Valentine on here, I will. If anyone knows his contact information, please send it to me because I'll get in touch with him and bring him on. Did you ever watch any of the matches with Greg Valentine? Because I know you were in the ring with him. I know you were sort of, almost phantom tag team champions where you never lost the belts and you're still champions after 50 years. But did you ever actually just watch him in the ring as a fan? Because he was a slow starter, as Gorilla Monsoon always used to make mention of. But he knew what he was doing and he was really solid as well. I think he's a bit of an unsung hero of the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, it was like the genetics. He was able to take what Johnny V did and move it into the 80s and beyond. The slower style. Obviously not a British bulldog or a high flying style, but he could do the moves and the down, and he would get the credibility. So if you're able to establish yourself and do what you do and stick to your guns, you establish that type of credibility. He was like I mentioned last time. I think he was a solid heel. One of those back. I think except for the only guys I see missing from the group that Vince put together with Orndorff and Valentine and Slaughter and myself and the other heels that were the foundational ones for building the WWF to the WWE transition took place. Only guys, and he was young. A guy like Arn Anderson, and he went into the territory after eventually anyway. Mm-hmm. So he was another, but only most of the building blocks, were there. And then all the other guys came later, the Adonises, and Patera came back and, different type of guys, But, he started with he was a strong foundational piece where he could, he'd drawn money everywhere too. With the bottom, whether his style or his talent. People believe maybe it was reminiscent of Johnny V or something like that. But they bought the style. They bought him and they bought everything, everything about it.
Did you ever watch the Roddy Piper Starcade match, the chain match? Did you ever watch that after the fact or maybe at the time?
No. I watched what I watched was him and when I was out of the business, I don't know where I was. Then I got a WrestleMania thing or whatever it was, a pay-per-view from somewhere, but it was the Goldust match. And I thought that was great. They did everything, and they were supposed to fight on a back lot in Hollywood or something, and then they jumped into I know it was Piper because he had a white Bronco at the time and was simulated the O.J. Simpson driving down the freeway chasing Stardust, Goldust into the back to the LA sports arena, and I thought that was a great. I watched that whole thing, and because it wasn't really much of a, and with the bustier and then ripping his clothes off. I thought the very next night, because Goldust was hot. He was white hot at the time, and I thought after that night, and it changed. The title changed hands that night as well, I think, or kept hands with the champion. I can't remember who the champion is, but I thought the very next night on Raw, they should have given Goldust a strap. But I thought he had, and just even though Roddy, which he was, known to do, had more or less humiliated him on pay-per-view, he'd still, blown his status up to another level, wearing the women's underwear underneath the clothes and that gimmick he was doing. I thought he was masterful.
Man, I'll bring up a couple of things with that. With WWF, Goldust was really, I think he was maybe just like too far out, because I know they lost sponsors because of Goldust, Dustin's portrayal, because it's 1996 and they weren't having it.
Sign of the times.
Yeah, sign of the
times.
People
weren't ready for it. Yeah. It was.
Did he?
They gave him a part. They gave him a part, and he did it. He did it wonderfully. He did it perfectly. So but the times they were changing, and
with the Backlot Brawl, it's almost like one of the very first cinematic matches that all like these last couple of years or this last year and a half seems to be all the rage. There was the Undertaker and AJ Styles, and it was all pre-filmed, pre-recorded, and cut later. And I think Sting's been in one as well with AEW. So somehow they were 20, 25 years ahead of the time as well there. But I remember watching that, and man, that was a really brutal match. That even for '96 family-friendly WWF, even if it was, pre-recorded.
Well, that's a Piper special. That's a.
It was a They Live special that in the parking lot. It was only missing a pair of sunglasses, I think, to fight over.
That's a Piper McMahon collaboration. Roddy loved to wreck things, wrecking cars and TVs and breaking things. So I could see, knowing Roddy as well as I did, I could see him all over that thing. Yeah. And the chases and this. When he ripped his suit off and he had those women's underwear on underneath, I just cried. That was great. And I thought immediately tomorrow you've got to put the belt on this guy. First thing in the morning, first thing at Raw. You've got to, but who listens to me?
They wouldn't even have Scott Hall didn't even want to wrestle him because he was just like not into it, and he wouldn't even touch him. So,
oh really?
Yeah. I mean, they did have a couple of matches, but then I think he just sort of refused to do the feud, and his excuse.
He was a fine technical worker. Mm. He worked like he worked like an Amarillo. He was another Murdoch or Terry Falker. He was just another Amarillo guy. As far as once he got through all the Goldust and all the he's probably far from transsexual. So he had he just got into it and just shot with that thing, and probably overdid it. But if you're going to get a character over like that, you've got to overdo it. And I thought it was fine work, personally, myself.
You can't be half pregnant. That's the old saying, isn't it? You can't be half pregnant. You've got to if you either all or nothing.
And back to our earlier conversation, Brian Blair said she was almost a virgin.
Oh, dearie me. I'll tell you what, I was going to end on that because it's perfect. I'm going to ask you one more question, then we will continue. And I will ask you, and this is actually something I'm genuinely interested in as well, is Tito lost the belt to Greg Valentine, September 24th, 1984, in London, Ontario, Canada. Now, this was the time, really, when the WWF was really getting into Canada quite a lot. Do you remember exactly when sort of, the full assault on Canada, the encroachment in Canada started with the WWF?
Oh, they always had Toronto. Toronto with Jack Tunney, and he was he was a crony of Vince Senior, and right to Junior. So the Toronto was always, but they'd work, and I guess they kind of had the free reign up there, maybe because it was Canada, maybe I don't know why, but they used NWA. I guess because Kiniski had a piece of that too, as well. So they'd work NWA talent into there as well. And Toronto was always. I don't not remember going up to Toronto when I was working there. So we always worked Toronto for Jack Tunney, and you have sandwich. You had a hotel room with sandwiches and beer after the matches, and it's a pretty cool thing. And right there in the Holiday Inn down, right by the airport. And it was a good. So we always had Toronto. It was when he started moving into Winnipeg and some of those other, and then some of the other Montreal. And then, because that's probably why he took on the Rougeaus and Dino, because Dino was such a big card in Montreal. So I'm sure, they made, they had those backroom deals, with Vince Senior and whoever was in charge of Montreal was Bravo or Rougeaus or, Gino Brito. I don't know who actually was, Montreal at the time, but. There, so it was later, slowly taking over Canada, but Toronto was always a WWF stronghold. I just because of the relationship with Tunney and Senior and Junior and the proximity to Buffalo and those upstate towns, because there was understanding that they wouldn't come across the border to that Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica. That line of towns in upstate New York there, which were great business. They were $12,000 to $30,000 buildings, $12,000 to $25,000 payoff nights in a 3 or 4 night span. You'd run Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, and it was a 4-night run, and all of them were great towns. So, it was probably a give and take right there at that borderline there with Canada. There's a lot of guys from the Toronto, Nick DiCarlo and those kind of guys that had enhancement wrestlers, because there was a big area. Guys used to come out of Hamilton, right outside of Toronto. All Billy Red Lions. And God, I can't think of all the great names, all the Boluses and the Toluses. All those guys that came out of that area, Angelo Mosca, eventually, and all those people that came out from that, they used to come down and do the Buffalo and Rochester. So it was a sharing type of business.
With the Tunney, since you mentioned him, and I'll go back to one other thing before I forget as well. So with Jack Tunney, is it like around 1985 he turns up as the quote-unquote president of the WWF? Yeah. And basically he was this very distinguished-looking man who I don't think ever did a sentence complete without sort of flubbing at least one line. But he seemed to be there for years. I mean, did you ever actually meet him and talk to him? Did he ever come to the shows?
Oh, yeah. He was around all the time. Like I tell you, he did beer and sandwiches after the matches in Toronto and Maple Leaf Gardens. They'd have a hotel room. He was a pretty class guy. It was nothing over the top or, nothing, to ever think he was a PT Barnum of professional wrestling, and he got the talent from his dad. He got the Frank Tunney. What was it? Jack Tunney.
Yeah,
Jack Tunney was the father's name. Yeah.
No. Jack Tunney was the WWF president, I think.
Okay, well, but Frank Tunney was the.
Yeah.
Frank Tunney was his father. Then. So he passed. He took it over from the old man, and they had a lot it's a pretty populated area up there around Ontario, and Toronto, and those areas up there. So you had a lot of towns. They're just summer towns. Winter would be just crazy.
Did you ever have any issues, or did anyone have any issues sneaking anything over the Canadian border?
sure guys did. I remember King Curtis.
It's always King Curtis.
King Curtis had we've been down in Florida, and he had guys, Freddie Botello or something. I used to always do promo using the guy's name, Freddie Botello from Makawao, Maui. And I guess the incident, LSD, some lady jumping through a window or something, and so somebody says the guy from Maui send him 200 or 300 hits of acid, and he called Vince. He said, "I can't go to Toronto. I just got 200 hits of acid. I don't want to go across the border." That was it. He went back to Hawaii.
Was that genuinely why he was let go of from the WWF? Was he?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, down in Miami there. They had his father. He called him the Happy Hawaiian. he kept his father from being a chief of police.
Really?
Commissioner, yeah. Oh, Curtis used to get in all kinds of trouble over here. Tally Ho, when he was alive, he told me, "Oh, I saw the guy. Some guy. They lived in a rugged section of Hawaii. They call Waianae or Maka'a out of the thing. And the father had land all over the place, Maui and Aiea, Honolulu, everything, but Maka'a. So evidently, somebody had slapped his mother, put their hands on the mother, and Curtis. They called him the Bull for a reason. So I guess you found the guy. What hand did you? The hand you hit my mother with. His mother was a Chinese Hawaiian lady, and he took the guy, put his hand down and drove the car over his arm. drove the car. I remember Talio talking to us. I saw the guy that Curtis had that run in with hit his mother. So he ran over the guy's arm with his car. His hand is still crumpled. I guess the hand would still be pretty crumpled. But that was Curtis. Curtis was Tally Ho tells stories about him. First class going to Japan because he was one of those pre-Bruiser Brody. Abdullah the Butcher. He got Bruiser and Abdullah. He started Bruiser, but I guess he and Mark Owen smoked the pipe. Regular pipe, tobacco pipe.
Right.
Yeah, in Talia, they're all in first class going to Bobinson, and then Curtis and Mark, they loaded with marijuana or weed, and blow the whole cabin out. I know what he knew was going on. Evidently, they covered it with pipe tobacco. Back in the days when you could smoke on the airplane. Oh, this was early '60s. Nobody before reefer madness had taken over.
Yeah, before people knew the smell.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Just before I stop the podcast, right? I have to clarify. So you said before he was fired from the WWF in like the mid '80s because he called up Vince and said he had 250 tabs of acid and he couldn't go over the border.
Yeah, but more or less. I don't know if he was fired or he just left. Just he just he'd had it. He was a beach. He had his beach business and everything going, and he'd been semi-retired. When we were doing shows in New Zealand, we begged him to come over, pay him first class, everything. And now I realize what it's like, getting on a plane for 10, 12 hours, and going through the airport and everything. Myself, I wouldn't travel for love nor money anymore. You'd have to be crazy, kind of something crazy to get me on an airplane now. But which keeps pumping up the offers. I just got a big offer a couple weeks ago. The guy, I said, "Yeah, but I need a babysitter. If I go, I need somebody to travel with me for at least 25% of the money that I'd be getting, and the travel accommodations. It's not fiscally responsible. I guess if they, now I don't want to travel. I think getting off of that. Yeah, Curtis. Yeah, Curtis says I can't go to Canada. Just got a couple hundred hits of acid I don't want to cross the border. I'm going back to Hawaii.
That might genuinely be the greatest reason anyone's ever been fired from anywhere. So we'll say he was fired, and
I don't know if he was fired or just more or less that was kind of giving his notice.
Yeah. It's either this unnecessary travel I don't want to do, or it's 200 days of madness.
Yeah. Well, you could just take it and sit there, he always told me, I said, Curtis, I need a whole week to, go into and come out of that kind of, it's like, preparation, you just drain your body, but it didn't phase him.
I think that sort of like sorts out one of the other mysteries as well. When he was talking about the Bengal tigers and stuff like that, all of a sudden it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, he was famous for they called it the cookie in Australia. I guess you just lick off the cookie and it was solid LSD or something. I don't know. I've never, but they always, all the boys that had been to Australia and spoke of it, used to speak of it.
They were never the same again when they came back.
No, yeah.
Right, so I'm going to shut this podcast down. We're going to continue this next week, so I'll turn to the right camera. Thank you very much for joining us.
Back to Tito Santana.
No,
maybe we'll cover a little bit of Tito Santana.
Do you know what? If I knew more about King Curtis, it would just be nothing. Every week it'd just be like the acid story of the week with King Curtis, if I had my way.
Oh, yeah. And guys with my age and a little younger than he was just a legend. Until the great promos, great talker. It wasn't until Piper came around that people thought he had a peer for promos and stuff. Wasn't he delivered?
So I only know him from the Sullivan, my son, and from WCW and stuff like that.
We had the big Hart thing too, and he was sitting. He was sitting in the hospital bed, and all the doctors came in. That's good for a different time. Okay.
Right, I will definitely ask you about the hospital bed on the next episode. But for now, all the plugs, you heard the beginning of the podcast, no doubt.
Yeah.
If you need to hear them again, refer to the beginning of the podcast. But for now, thank you very much for watching or listening, however you're absorbing this. If you're taking this by dropping it under your tongue and then your head floats away like a balloon, maybe you're taking this podcast like this. But thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Aloha.